So I'm sometimes asked, is it okay as a leader to be weak? As a better question, is it okay not to be weak? I mean, if we're not weak, we're in big trouble. I learned, like I'm sure many of you, not to be weak in life as well as in leadership. Now, Western culture, as we know it, is all about celebrities, the strong, the great entrepreneurs, the brilliant, the wise, those intellectually gifted, the athletic, who are strong and making it happen. But my whole life went through a drastic revolution when I came into emotionally healthy discipleship, when actually my life fell apart. And not through my decision to be weak, it happened to me. And I found myself weak and basically on my back. But God met me there, and I began to, for the first time, discover all the scriptures about weakness and what it meant to lead out of weakness versus lead out of my strengths. And I discovered people like Jesus. Sounds funny, doesn't it? I mean, Jesus, for example, in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's sweating drops of blood to do the will of the Father, looking very weak. And I discovered later that many commentators in the Middle Ages wanted to get rid of that passage because Jesus looked so weak as the God-man. And then we had Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a donkey, not a war horse like Alexander the Great. And we see Jesus on the cross saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? Versus saying, victory in Jesus, and he doesn't quote Psalm 23, my God, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. It's just amazing to see Jesus modeling meekness and weakness. And we see the same thing in Paul, who has a thorn in the flesh and over and against the super apostles of his day who were doing signs and wonders and having great revelations. Paul speaks about a thorn in the flesh that he couldn't get rid of, and then he writes, God's power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly in my weakness so that Christ's power might rest in me. And I was like, my gosh, I can't imagine boasting in weakness. And then I discovered David, who committed murder and adultery, and then made sure it got written in the history books in 2 Samuel, then wrote a whole song about it to be sung in the churches of his day in Psalm 51. And he says, God does not delight in burnt offerings and sacrifice and religious activity, but in a broken and contrite heart, Psalm 51:17. And so I look at Jesus and Paul and David, and I said, oh my goodness. And then I discovered all over Scripture, you've got leaders who are imperfect and broken, like Peter. Obviously, he's a loudmouth and impulsive and jumping out of boats and denying Jesus. And you got John Mark, who deserted Paul, and Timothy, who's fearful and apparently has some kind of stomach ulcers, maybe from anxiety. You had Elijah, who got burnt out, and Jeremiah, who was suicidal, and Hosea, who had a bad marriage, and Martha, who was a blamer, and Noah getting drunk, and the list just goes on, and Abraham having a tryst and a baby out of wedlock, and the list goes on. The Samaritan woman having 5 husbands, and just Scripture just shows these broken, imperfect vessels through whom God comes. It's just amazing. And so I rediscovered actually grace. I rediscovered the gospel 26 years ago as a leader, and it began to switch the whole way I lead, to lead out of weakness versus strength. And I'll never forget it. It was such a change for me. In fact, my wife, Jerry, would say, your sermons had a distinct shift from that point forward, because in the past, I led out of, again, I teaching a passage of Scripture, and I would talk about how I've been living it out. And again, leading out of my strengths, I would kind of cover over my failures. But now I was approaching passages, maybe it's something as simple as giving, and then sharing about my own struggles with giving, and began to lead and speak out of vulnerability from passages. And that's when I found out that's where the life was, actually. That's where people were getting blessed. And I could see the whole culture in our church begin to change, and a level of freedom and safety and love flowing. Even writing, you can write out of a false self, give a lot of information, and you can write vulnerably out of your true self. And I realized those are two very different things. And so even now to this day, as I've grown older, I realize I must remain in vulnerability. It's a choice, because God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. And I realize that, okay, I need to be learning from young leaders. It's very important to be a learner. I've got a lot to learn. I need to make sure that I'm creating environments where people can critique me, even when they're younger than me. And so really the question is, are leaders allowed to be weak? No, the issue is, can you be a leader and not model weakness and vulnerability? And I would say to you, biblically, the answer is no, because friends, we want to be creating the safest, most loving, free environment in the world, in this colony called the church, this countercultural community. And it begins with us.